It's been nice and warm. And joining me, as usual, is Gregory. Gregory, how are you? And how's the weather where you are?
It's been beautiful, though it's still a bit chilly. Warm.
Okay. A bit chilly. Okay, but beautiful. So, welcome, listeners. As I said, this is the spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abrushi. And I want to wish you uh, this coming weekend is Easter. So happy Easter. And our Muslim friends are uh, celebrating the month of Ramadan. So happy Ramadan to them. And also, our Jewish friends are going to be celebrating Passover, which is 1 week, starting again also this weekend. Also, it is spring. I know it started already, but it also coincides with Easter. So, happy spring to people, even if it's a bit late. So, welcome to the show, listeners. As you know, we have a new topic every week, and after what I just told you, the topic we have chosen for this Tuesday, it is Easter time. Easter time. You are welcome to join us with any questions or comments. You can contact us on our UK number, which is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I'm going to begin with what is the Grail Message? The Grail Message in the Light of Truth by Abrushi is a spiritual knowledge of life. It offers an explanation of the world, a picture of creation on the basis of natural laws. Its lectures contain valuable basic elements as a help in life. Through the knowledge mediated, the reader is again brought closer to life and led back to God. The Grail Message deals with important fundamental questions of life by explaining in a clear and logical way the automatic working of the laws of nature, the whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover through the intuitive perception if what is stated is the truth. Combining with matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises, where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I'd like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail Message, Abrushi. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail Message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole, without leaving any gaps. Again and again, in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. the word of the Grail Message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with 7 seals. And I'd like to give you one more quote from the author. I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace if he earnestly seeks for the truth. So, dear listeners, again, I want to wish you happy Ramadan, happy Easter and Passover, and also happy spring. And the topic we're going to be discussing tonight is Easter time. You are welcome to join us with any questions or comments. You can contact us on our UK number, which is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, I just want to, as I said, I'm wishing all our listeners who might be celebrating Ramadan or Easter or Passover, and I just thought I'll just talk a bit about that before we talk on the topic directly. So Ramadan, in case people don't know, I just thought I will say what it is. It's the month of fasting, prayer, and reflection, which Muslims celebrate or take part in. And it is supposed to be the month where the Quran was revealed as a guidance for mankind. So I want to wish our Muslim brothers and sisters well in this time. And so I also want to talk about Easter. Easter, we know, is a holiday for us in the West, you can say, celebrated by Christians mostly, and it marks the resurrection of Jesus. First, actually, I should say the crucifixion, then followed by the resurrection 3 days after. So, and actually it is followed by also some Christians, let's say, do that. They have a period of fasting for the month of Lent, or during this period of Lent. So some people may be doing that as well. And also Passover, which the Jews celebrate, which is when the Jews were in Egypt under the rule of the Pharaoh, it was their Passover is their celebration from escaping or being freed, is a better word I would say, from the rule of the Egyptians and being led into Israel. It's known as Exodus as well. So they celebrate that in Passover, with Passover. And also, this may not be so well known, because we know in the Christian Easter celebrations they have adopted some practices from, you could say, mythical times. And so I just wanted to bring that out as well. So there is a goddess called Eostre. It's maybe more commonly known in the German legends, and so she's known as a goddess, which marks the dawn of spring. and it celebrates the sun rising in the east. So it's basically, you could say, new life. You know, the end of the winter time, and bringing new life. So I'm just doing it in a brief way. So all these celebrations, Gregory, we are sort of celebrating together, like a coincidence, if that can be, if we've looked at it that way. This all come together. Now, just want to ask Gregory, is there any special significance with all these different, you could say, celebrations coming together at the same time in this year, let's say? I mean, I would say in the past years, they are at a similar time, but somehow they seem to have coincided at the same time, you know, this year. Is there any special significance in that?
Well, thanks for these particular questions. Before one talks of significance or not significance, the need is there to understand the background, the framework upon which processes in nature exist and how these things came about. It must be observed that there are about 4 seasons which are being celebrated here on earth. The season of winter, of spring, of autumn. Summer is also there. In spring in nature, one finds the sprouting of plants as if we have a new beginning. So what must be observed here is a new beginning in nature. These sort of processes have existed from the initiation or the initial concept of the earth. It has always been there before the so-called religions came into existence. Because we have these things becoming new, a new beginning, many a person who had observed processes in nature decided to come together to celebrate that which they themselves classify as new. Because at that time, the so-called natives, they had clear intuitive perceptions, and even some of them could see what those who care for nature were up to at that particular time. So these things were not done in an arbitrary manner. These processes were or had been instituted or are what one may refer to as a framework upon which many things exist right here on earth. So you have Easter, or you have the Passover, which coincided with, say, spring, or you have the celebrations of the Muslims in which they start their fasting. But one thing must be made very clear, which persists, religion or not religion. That with Easter, with spring, the intuitive picture is a new beginning, granted the opportunity for continuous existence. One must also carefully understand when people add fasting to it. Fasting has nothing to do with refusing to take nutrients for the physical body, which has been granted the individual to experience here on earth. Depriving it of the nutrient that it requires is not fasting. When fasting is mentioned, the intuitive picture is to desist in our thoughts, in our intuitions, from the everyday occurrence of the mundane. That has always been the picture that fasting should mean, such that by turning our gaze away from the mundane, that which is of spirit is contemplated.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory, and picture that you have painted there. I would say most of us would not be thinking about, the seasons, spring, and which is in nature, as the you could say the foundation of how we see things. It's just something that we are just maybe aware of, but not really focused as being, this is all coming through and from nature. And although we human beings do our activities, we seem to think, we are independent of all this nature somehow. So it's good to be reminded that in the end, nature is still there, and we have to align with it. So thank you for that. Now, in this, the topic tonight, we've called it Easter time. And I've chosen that in one sense to talk about the Easter from nature, looking at it through nature as well, and also to look at the how the Christians look at the story, let's say in the Bible, of Jesus' crucifixion and his resurrection. And so what I'm going to do now, Gregory, I'm going to read from the Bible. Let me just make sure I'm ready for this before I do that. So yes, there's something I'd like to, listeners, I'd like to read from the Bible. This is to do with Jesus's, the Last Supper, this celebration with Jesus and his disciples. So here we go. So I'm going to read from listeners from the Bible, the King James Version, and it's Matthew chapter 26, verse 17 to 30. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? And he said, Go into the city to such a man, and say unto him, The Master saith, The time is at hand, and I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. Now when the eve was come, he sat down with the 12. And as they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto the Lord, Is it I? And he answered and said, He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. The Son of Man goeth, as it is written of him. But woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. Then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, is it I? He said unto him, Thou hast said. And as they were eating, Jesus took the bread and blessed it, and brake it, and gave it to the disciples, and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, Drink ye all of it. For this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many, for the remission of sins. But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. So listeners, I've just read from the Bible there, in New Testament King James version, from Matthew 26, verse 17 to 30, talking about Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples. Gregory, we know it led here, the next part of this story, we know it's when Jesus was crucified. But here, Gregory, he said in this story, he's saying that one of his disciples will betray him. Maybe I should not focus on that right now, actually. I just want to say that let me focus on the actual supper. So where he says he will shed his blood, and that meal is a symbol of that. So I want to say, Gregory, sorry, I should just want to recap, I'm afraid. So he broke the bread, as I said, and then in the story, and then he also asked the disciples to drink wine as a symbol of his blood, shedding of his blood. Gregory, and it said that was remission of sins. So Christians believe, Gregory, that Jesus died, for the sins of man through his death on the cross. Is that what Jesus, in this supper, Last Supper, is that what he meant by remission of sins? That he's dying and giving his blood and his body for saving mankind?
Very sadly, absolutely not. There have been completely wrong interpretation of these sayings. One must understand, or should strive to understand, that an intuitive or a spiritual language is all-embracing, is different from the opinions of men which have been woven into it. For Christ himself made it very clear, whatever a man has sown, that must he or she reap. So how could he then, all of a sudden, he who was sent by the Father to bring clarification into the tangled undergrowth of human opinions, how could he then take upon himself the sins of others when he himself has not sinned? Such things are completely out of the question. What each person must strive to understand is that whatever they themselves have put into creation, that seed will definitely grow, mature, and they will then reap the fruits. However, at that particular time, when Christ himself already became very conscious of his departure, he gave these, or he permitted these, what one may call Passover, or it wasn't called Easter then. They all came together to celebrate because he knew he himself was leaving very soon. Many may ask, how did he know that? It should be very clear, when a man has sown a seed, that on many occasions, the returns do not just come immediately. Whilst he was about bringing the good word to many, one of his disciples had gone to implicate him, to ask for bribes, or to offer all sorts of things, because his own vision is different from the vision of Christ. And therefore, he went and betrayed his master. As that was done, spiritually, that thought, that will became a deed, which, because of the vision of Christ, would already see what could happen to him. He could already perceive all these things. At the same time, he himself was willing to forgive whatever had been done against him. And as a parting gift, he called the disciples to celebrate, because he knew that was the last time they would be together as a group. And there he gave out of himself. All what he said must be interpreted in a spiritual language, just as was mentioned that fasting has nothing to do with abstinence from food, but has everything to do with pushing away the mundane to focus on that which is spiritual. If that line of reasoning or that line of thought is considered, then what Christ said will take a different meaning, for he stressed for the forgiveness of many. So each strain of thought, each word and each sentence and the connections that Christ put there must be examined very carefully, bit by bit, in order to come to a more intuitive meaning rather than a mundane and distorted interpretation.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for your explanation and answer. Many people may have been surprised in how you are, in the answer you've given there, especially if they have been believing, let's say, what they've been brought up with, and of course, here we ask people, as you say, Gregory, to use your own intuition, not to follow blindly, you could say, whatever we have been taught, but to assess it with our intuition. So you can come to our own proper understanding, you could say, and clarity. So thank you for that. Dear listeners, you are listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the Grail Message in the Light of Truth by Abdushin. And if you are interested in knowing more about the Grail Message or want to get a copy of the Grail Message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that. www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And as I said, you're listening to Bless Radio, and we are broadcasting on Bless Radio 1, the number 1.com. You can also listen to us on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, type in the search box, Bless Radio 1, again the number 1, space, live stream. That's for the live show. You can also listen to the recording of this show the next day, also on YouTube. Go to youtube.com and type in the search box, Bless Radio 1, the number 1, space, Grail Message, space, the topic of the show, which tonight is Easter time. You can also listen to our previous recordings there as well. And there's a third website you can go to listen to us, which is zeno.fm/Bless Radio 1, the number 1. Zeno is ZENO.fm/Bless Radio 1, the number 1. And just to remind you, the topic we are discussing tonight is Easter time. You are welcome to join us with any questions or comments. You can contact us on our UK number, which is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 7939 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, I just want to go further about, you could say Jesus' crucifixion, which people thought, or some people believe, that it's a sacrifice, a necessary sacrifice to redeem mankind. But as you've already pointed out, what we sow, we must reap. So it is us who have to redeem what we have done. But then some people think, okay, if Jesus died, it's like it was meant to happen. Crucified, it was meant to happen, and things went in a particular way. If so, again, otherwise it doesn't sound right. How can an innocent person die? Especially somebody who's a messenger of God. So what I want to do now, I want to now again go back to the Bible and read the story of how Jesus was brought, to his crucifixion. And so I'm going to read again now this is from the Bible, Mark chapter 15. Yes, I might not read the whole chapter, but I'm going to read this. And this is from a different Bible, the Good News Bible. So it's got more modern English, and I'd like to use that. So this is Mark chapter 15, and it's titled, Jesus is brought before Pilate. Early in the morning, the chief priests met hurriedly with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole council, and made their plans. They put Jesus in chains and led him away and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "So you say." The chief priests were accusing Jesus of many things. So Pilate questioned him again, "Aren't you going to answer? Listen to all their accusations." Again, Jesus refused to say a word, and Pilate was amazed. At every Passover festival, Pilate was in the habit of setting free one of the prisoners that the people asked for. At that time, a man named Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder in the riot. When the crowd gathered and began to ask Pilate for the usual favor, he asked them, "Do you want me to set free the king of the Jews?" He knew very well that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him because they were jealous. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to ask instead for Pilate to set free Barabbas for them. Pilate spoke again to the crowd. "What then do you want me to do with the one you call King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." "But what crime has he committed?" Pilate asked. They shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." Pilate wanted to please the crowd, so he set Barabbas free for them. Then he had Jesus whipped and handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers took Jesus inside to the courtyard of the governor's palace and called together the rest of the company. They put a purple robe on Jesus and made a crown of thorny branches and put it on his head. Then they began to salute him. Long live the King of the Jews. They beat him over the head with a stick and spat on him, fell on their knees and bowed to him. When they finished mocking him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. I'm going to stop there. Gregory, this story there, as you see, Pilate found Jesus, you could say, innocent, and and then there's supposedly this practice where they can set one person free for Passover festival, and the crowd chose Barabbas, which everybody knew was the guilty one, and rather than Jesus, they said crucify him. So once they knew, Gregory, or at least Pilate was clear that Jesus is innocent, and yet he's still crucified. That's the verdict that is given to him. You wonder, how could that happen? So, Gregory, is there any explanation? Maybe, as they say, written in the scriptures, that Jesus had to die. So is there any explanation why he had to die? Or crucified?
Of course, there is an explanation, and a very clear explanation for that. In the first instance, Pilate, was he not the governor? Was he not the jury? Was he not the one who decides what should happen? Why did he himself, who is governor, who should decide, now ask the rabble to decide for him? It only means Pilate was weak. He could not decide because he was afraid for his position. And with that, he gave in to injustice. For had he stood his ground, because these people lacked any evidence, then that crucifixion would not have happened. One should not forget some part you did not read, where his wife had told him about not to have anything to do with an innocent man. The evidence was clear. Pilate was mocking not only the Jews, but also Christ himself by calling him names in questions. Are you the king of the Jews? One should call a spade a spade. Part of it was his failings to stand up upright for that which is just. It must be remarked that those who called out to crucify were a few days earlier had said Hosanna. That is, at that time, the maturity of the rabble that were called the Jews at that particular time. Pilate knew very well this man had not committed any sin, but was afraid for his position and had to release a criminal when did it happen that the Romans, with their proud culture of justice, will now release a criminal and persecute a just man? So it was this feeling, no doubt about that. So many Christians who says this had to happen is greatly mistaken. For Christ himself had already thought very carefully and had showed numerous examples. Christ was crucified basically because he brought that which was self-consistent and was the truth. And many cannot stand that. They can't stand that which is consistent with the laws of nature, with the laws of the Almighty. So envy welled up deep within those who were shouting, "Crucify." Jealousy also welled up. And wherever you have envy and jealousy, you will then have that those who are engaged in it become blind. In their blindness, they even demanded injustice and not justice.
Thank you, Gregory, for bringing clarity, in this, in understanding this story, if I can put it that way, and how people have, you could say, mixed up and confused things which are clearly clear cut. Justice is justice and injustice is injustice, and you can't mix the two. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on to another part of the Bible now. It is the actual crucifixion. Just want to get, yes, this is from Luke, chapter 24, and it's verse 1 to 12. Just going to get there 1 second. So this is about the resurrection. Oh. Let me just make sure I'm right about this. 1 second. Luke chapter 24, yeah. That's right. Yes. So again, yes, this is from Luke chapter 24, verse 1 to 12, and it's the resurrection of Jesus. Very early on Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb, carrying the spices they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the entrance to the tomb. So they went in, but they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. They stood there puzzled about this, when suddenly two men in bright shining clothes stood by them. Full of fear, the women bowed down to the ground. As the men said to them, "Why are you looking among the dead for one who is alive? He is not here. He has been raised. Remember what he said to you while he was in Galilee. The Son of Man must be handed over to sinful men, re-crucified, and 3 days later rise to life. Then the women remembered his words, returned from the tomb, and told all these things to the 11 disciples and all the rest. The women were Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary the mother of James. They and the other women with them told these things to the apostles. But the apostles thought that what the women said was nonsense, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. He bent down and saw the linen wrappings, but nothing else. Then he went back home amazed at what had happened. So, Gregory, I will actually continue because that's not really the whole story I would like to share with people. So I would like to now read. I'm going to just continue reading. On the same day, 2 of Jesus' followers were going to a village named Emmaus, about 11 kilometers from Jerusalem, and they were talking to each other about all the things that had happened. And they talked and discussed. Jesus himself drew near and walked along with them. They saw him, but somehow did not recognize him. Jesus said to them, "What are you talking about to each other as you walk along?" They stood still with sad faces. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only visitor in Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have been happening there last few days?" "What things?" he asked. "The things that happened to Jesus of Nazareth," they answered. "This man was a prophet and was considered by God and by all the people to be powerful in everything he said and did. Our chief priests and rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and he was crucified. And we had hoped that he would be the one who was going to set Israel free. Besides all that, this is now the 3rd day since it's happened." Some of the women of our group surprised us, and they went at dawn to the tomb, but could not find his body. They came back saying that they had seen a vision of angels who told them that he is alive. Some of our group went to the tomb and found it exactly as the women had said, but they did not see him. Then Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are, how slow you are to believe everything the prophets said. Was it not necessary for the Messiah to suffer these things and then to enter his glory?" And Jesus explained to them what was said about himself in all the scriptures, beginning with the books of Moses and the writings of all the prophets. As they came near the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going farther. But they held him back, saying, "Stay with us. The day is almost over and it is getting dark." So he went in to stay with them. He sat down to eat with them and took the bread and said the blessing. Then he broke the bread and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he disappeared from their sight. They said to each other, "Wasn't it like a fire burning in us when he talked to us on the road and explained the scriptures to us?" They got up once and went back to Jerusalem, where they found the 11 disciples gathered together with the others and saying, "The Lord is risen. Indeed, he has appeared to Simon." The 2 then explained to them what had happened on the road and how they recognized the Lord when he broke the bread. Gregory, this just read this from Luke chapter 24 about the resurrection of Jesus. We talk about the laws of nature, Gregory, and when somebody's died or killed or crucified, nobody expects them to arise or resurrect. So what was happening here, Gregory, because people believe they couldn't find the body in the tomb, and then later Jesus appeared to certain people, it appears, and then yes, it looks like they recognized him there, and he was even speaking with them. So how can this story can be explained? Is it even true?
Well, thanks for bringing up these readings. And as with everything, if one does not examine with his or her intuitions, with his or her intuitive perceptions, then that person is stuck in the tangled opinions and the tangled undergrowth of distorted human opinions, of human vanity. In the first instance, here was Christ who was led for crucifixion. Where were the disciples? These disciples who had been with him all the while, he mediated to them. They even denied him. One of them betrayed him. These denials of betrayal only came to be because they themselves, the disciples, had not absorbed the teachings of Christ deep within them to become a firm certainty. Had that been the case, then some of the suffering which he himself had to undergo would be minimized. It is quite remarkable that even right there in Golgotha, there is no presentation, no remark of the disciples being there. After all, he, their Lord, who had shown understanding beyond human capacity, was turned away from them, and they remained silent. We had the failure of Pilate, the failure of those who were closest to him because they lacked the intuitive understanding of what he had brought. Only thereafter, when his physical body had been made dead, only then did it occur to some of them that he has departed from them. The two followers on their way to Emmaus, when they perceived another person who was with them going in the same direction, they did not recognize him. Why? They couldn't recognize him or very simply, the body which they perceived was different from the body which they had known. Therefore, the grace of the light had permitted them to perceive of the non-earthly body of their master. Even then, they had not come to recognition. Only at the last stage of the journey did they come to recognition, when the words or the expressions Christ had used sunk in deep within them and then came out, and intuitively they recognized that only their master could speak such a language. And in jubilation, they ran back to inform the other disciples. So it becomes very clear that there was the physical body of Christ, which has been crucified, and therefore the essence had left the physical body. And one should also strive to understand that the physical body is only animated by that which is non-physical. That which is non-physical may be referred to as the soul. That being the case, the features of the soul, of the ethereal body, are not that far-fetched from that of the physical body, because they are finer, but the functionalities are close, but not equivalent. When Christ had to leave, he himself had to wait for some time. For, strictly speaking, due to such crucifixion, the soul was forcibly bumped out of the physical body through such tortures. When Benny referred to death, there are two types. Whoever has been born on earth must, of course, die. That means whoever had been granted a physical body to experience, which physical body is a tool. That physical body is not meant to live forever, it's only temporary. That is not what Christ came for. For he knew that the human personality only came to the earth, and in order to experience knowingly, needed to take on a physical body. And after a period, after some time, the human personality needed to journey on, to journey further. In that scenario, the physical body must be dropped. What he came for was very simple: to show man the way to the light, to show man the way to paradise, because he himself understands the way towards the origin of man, which is the spiritual kingdom. What he wanted to prevent was or is determination of that which is of spirit, the decimation of that which is of spirit. For the human personality started as a spirit seed grain and had to develop, had to evolve in a spiritual manner. And Christ also knew that for the human personality to do that, there was the need to incarnate in the world of matter, which world of matter is temporal. That means there is the coming into being of the world of matter, there is the maturing, and finally there is the dissolution of the world of matter. And the human personality has been granted the opportunity to come into that world of matter, to learn from it slowly, to mature, to sever itself as a self-conscious human spirit, which self-consciousness takes on the physical, the body, the human form, as we said. To prevent this dissolution, Christ had to show the path when he mentioned, I am the way, which basically intuitively means the path, the way which is equivalent to the path. Only those who follow that path in a step-by-step fashion will get home consciously to paradise. Else, they'll be lost in the undergrowth of the world of matter. And when the world of matter undergoes disintegration, they themselves will undergo disintegration if they had not severed themselves in a conscious manner by that period. So Christ used many an expression which must be understood spiritually. But what do we have? Confusion everywhere. Simplicity has been turned upside down. So Christ did not come to take away any person's sin, but he came and showed the way by his examples. And the greatest example which he presented is now referred to as the Lord's Prayer.
Thank you, Gregory, for your answer and the picture you painted there. And I've got more questions on that. But before I do ask you that, I just want to tell listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abdrushi. If you are interested in knowing more about the Grail Message or want to get a copy of the Grail Message for yourself, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that. www.grailmessage.com. dot Grail, Grail message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is Easter time. Easter time. You are welcome to join us with any questions or comments. You can contact us on our UK number, which is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And we are broadcasting on Bless Radio 1, the number 1.com. Also, we're broadcasting on YouTube. Go to youtube.com and type in the search box Bless Radio 1, again the number 1, space live stream. That is for the live show. You can listen to the recording of this show the next day. Again, go on YouTube, youtube.com, and type in the search box Bless Radio 1, the number 1, space Grail Message, space the topic of the show, which tonight is Easter time. And of course, you can listen to our previous shows there as well. And thirdly, we are also broadcasting on zeno.fm/Bless Radio 1. Zeno is ZENO.fm/Bless Radio 1, the number 1. Gregory, Jesus' life, in the story in the Bible we hear, he performed many miracles, bringing some people from life, from death, bringing them back to life, like Lazarus, and then healing people, from serious diseases, let's say leprosy. So there are many such stories. And then we've been talking about the resurrection of Jesus. Now, I just want to go into that. I know what you have said, but just want to go into the story, how it is in the Bible. As we know, Gregory, the women, after Jesus was crucified, let's say 3 days later, some women went to the tomb to put spices on his body, for burial. And then when they got there, the body was missing. And then it is said angels spoke to them to say that he's alive and he's, and risen. So just want to understand what happened to Jesus' body, because what you have said about the resurrection is that what people saw, because we talked in the reading just previously, that Jesus appeared to two men. I can't say who they are just now in my head, but and spoke with them, and they did not recognize him. So I just want to understand what happened to Jesus' body as it was missing from the tomb, because people will still say, oh, maybe he was in the body, and somehow the body was revived. So, because if you can help us with that.
Very simply, the activities of the rabble that shouted, "Crucify, crucify," must be taken into account. That same rabble would not hesitate to search for where he was buried and maybe do away with it. After all, they were pleased to have placed thorns on his head. They were pleased to have taunted him. They were gleeful that he is dead. His body had given up. But the darkness and those who permitted themselves to be used by such hatred were not satisfied with that. They wanted more. And therefore, some loyal disciple of Jesus, understanding the sentiments of the rebel, of those who hated Christ, carefully removed the body from where the body was initially taken and put in another place for a silent burial. That is what happened.
Thank you.
Therefore, when the women came in, they could find nothing. However, in their sorrow, in their anguish, their inner eyes were opened a bit, and they could perceive the presence of beings. It was those beings who now told them in their intuition, because they could hear this deep within them, that the body was not there. And it is good that they did not reveal where the body was then buried silently. For in their enthusiasm, they could go and reveal that to the disciples, and the disciples would be so happy. And what then happens? Before long, the rubble will know of it again and may go there and ransack. So the body of Christ was gently taken away into a private place where it was buried with respect in worship.
Thank you for that, Gregory. That might be news for people to know that this happened. But it that sort of helps us to understand, the story, you can say. Now I want to, Gregory, continue reading again some further in the Bible. It's actually continuing from where I left off in Luke, chapter 24, and this is verse 36 onwards. And it's just continuation from where I left off. It says, titled, Jesus appears to his disciples. While the two were telling them this, suddenly the Lord himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were terrified, thinking that they were seeing a ghost. But he said to them, "Why are you alarmed? Why are these doubts coming up in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet, and see that it is I myself. Feel me, and you will know, for a ghost doesn't have flesh and bones, as you can see I have." He said this and showed them his hands and his feet. "These are the very things I told you about a while I was still with you. Everything written about me in the law of Moses, the writings of the prophets, and the Psalms had to come true. Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures and said to them, "This is what is written. The Messiah must suffer and must rise from the death 3 days later. And in his name the message about repentance and forgiveness of sins must be preached to all nations, beginning in Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things, and I myself will send upon you what my Father has promised. But you must wait in the city until the power from above comes down upon you." I'm going to stop there. So that's just read there from Luke chapter 24, verses 36 to 49, about Jesus appearing to his disciples. Gregory, what I read there, Jesus saying that he has flesh and bones, and he's not a ghost. But Jesus, we have said that Jesus doesn't have a body. So how come, and he's even asking them to feel him, that they can prove that he has, his flesh and bones. How can that be happening? And even Gregory, it's a further point, this part of the story, it says he was given a cooked fish to eat. So it looks like he's back in his body there, Gregory. How is that possible?
One must take these writings, particularly from Luke, with a grain of salt, or one must completely dismiss them. In that reading, he appeared to them suddenly. When Christ was born, did he just appear, or he was born as a child and had to grow to maturity? He did not just appear as a fully matured man here on earth. Therefore, one must take those writings very carefully, for they cast so much doubt in the perfection of the will of the Almighty. When Luke had to make a report, he himself, Luke, who was not there, but had to listen to reports which were made by others. Of course, as with human personalities, there is the embellishment, just to present that which is convincing. However, there is no truth in it. That personality who has dropped his physical body will now suddenly be asking for physical food to convince human personalities. The fact remains that Christ himself, seeing their doubts, perceiving their doubts, had to ask for the grace to be permitted to show himself to these disciples who had gone through harrowing experience, for the Lord whom they loved was suddenly taken away from them. And they started having doubts about his origin, his existence. In fact, they were confused. Because they were confused in their souls when he, the master, came and had that opportunity, his first expression was peace. That they could recognize. Peace in the sense for them to calm down, to be able to attain an equilibrium of soul, to comprehend. The disciples were fortunate because the Father had granted Christ the opportunity to show himself in spirit, in soul. So these are the disciples who were filled with doubts and were so confused, were granted the opportunity to perceive him as he is when he had just departed. For they could not perceive him as he really is in the Father, because they themselves do not have that capability, that capacity to do so. So Christ had to show himself in the wounds that he had sustained, because that was what the disciples had experienced last. And that was what happened. All other writings were embellishment of intellectual sophistry, trying to justify that which is not justifiable. So much confusion had been put into it. And Luke himself shows his lack of understanding even of the scriptures. For here was Christ, and he was also making reference to the Son of Man. Two different personalities.
Thank you, Gregory, for this answer. Actually, when I read further, or little, say, the little notes, you can say, at the bottom of that reading, it does say, in different versions or different manuscripts of this Luke, there, let's say, one or two verses are not there. So it's like, not only what Luke has written, we are not sure if it's been fully transmitted to us accurately. Looks like there's different versions of the same writing. So nobody can definitively say that is exactly what Luke actually wrote. Maybe they can agree 95% or 90%, but they can't say absolutely that this is everything that what Luke wrote is there. So that's another point just for people to be aware, not to rely that these writings are, let's say, perfect. So thank you for that explanation, Gregory. I now, Gregory, want to think about crucifixion and the meaning of Easter, you can say, or how it should be understood or celebrated or commemorated. I'm trying to. So let me ask you, Gregory. We know that Jesus was innocent, and his death on the cross was not meant to be, even though it seems to have been predicted somehow. We know an innocent man should not take the sin of the guilty or others. So now that we know it actually happened, Gregory, this event did happen, and yes, he was resurrected. So is that the miracle that we are meant to, could say, acknowledge or appreciate, that Jesus died and then he overcame death in the resurrection? So yes. Is that the significance or the meaning that we are supposed to get from Easter, that Jesus rose from the death, from the crucifixion?
There is so much confusion. When it is said Jesus died, Jesus was born and required the physical body. And when his physical body was destroyed, he had to leave the physical body. But Christ himself remained whom he is. He was not his physical body. Physical body is only a tool. So also is every personality that has come to earth, every human personality that has incarnated on the earth in order to experience. The body is only a tool which is utilized whilst here on earth. The teachings which Christ brought shows the path which the human personality must take in order to escape the dissolution of the spirit, the dissolution of the experiences, of the structure, of the human form that the human personality has acquired so far. Only through the teachings of Christ, in following the map, in following the picture that he presented, only through that path can the human personality, in the fulfillment of the laws of creation, rise away from the world of matter back to its origin, the spiritual kingdom. Else, if the human personality does not follow that path which Christ himself has presented, then it runs into the possibility that it's unable to sever itself. When we now have the dissolution of the world of matter, which world of matter is temporal. And in that phase, those who are trapped, their spiritual maturity, their form will dissolve back to the spiritual gem from whence they had started initially. It means the efforts they had made from that time has been in vain. They are of no value. They are of no spiritual value. That is what Christ was referring to through his examples. Only when you follow the teachings, the paths he has set out, are you able to come to the kingdom of the Father. So the death which is referred to again and again is not the earthly death, it is the spiritual death.
Thank you, Gregory, again for your explanation. And which there's so much confusion, let's say, a belief in a certain doctrine, that Jesus died for my sins and redeemed me, because he's called the Messiah, he's called the Redeemer, and this is what had to happen. But somehow, let's say, some of us wonder if that can really be true, that somebody can, die for our sin. when we know that it's not him who has done the sin, it's us. And then maybe because we think, oh, it can't be possible to redeem ourselves, we need someone else who is like divine, who is above, more powerful. And then you start to believe this, understand that picture, or you start to believe that picture or explanation. I can't say the right words here. That God can save us. This is how God can save us. We can't save ourselves. But when you think clearly and logically, this can't be possible. You're asking for some injustice. You want justice, but you want the injustice to happen. And then it all becomes, you could say, ridiculous when you think deeply. So thanks for that. Dear listeners, I just want to remind you, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's a Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. UK time. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abdushin. If you are interested in knowing more about the Grail Message or want to get a copy of the Grail Message for yourself, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that. www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. Also, you are listening to us on blessradio1.com. That's the number one. We are also broadcasting on YouTube. Go to youtube.com and type in the search box Bless Radio 1, the number one again, space live stream. That's for the live show. You can listen to the recording of this show the next day. Go to youtube.com again and type in the search box Bless Radio 1, the number one, space Grail Message, space the topic of the show, which tonight is Easter time. And also you can hear our other previous shows also on YouTube. And finally, we are also broadcasting on Zeno.fm /Bless Radio 1. Zeno is ZENO.fm /Bless Radio 1, the number one. And yes, just to remind you, the topic we are doing is Easter time. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact us on our UK number, which is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I want to, Gregory, I'm just wondering, I was going to leave this a little bit to the end of the radio show, so I'm just thinking about that at the moment before I do that. Yes, before I do that, Greg, let's talk about some, let's say, potentially, symbolic meanings of the I did start at the beginning, Gregory, talking about any significance between Passover, Easter, Ramadan, even the season of spring. And you answered about nature and focusing on nature and the season of spring. But we didn't really go into if there's any like Thai symbolic meaning, if when these events come together. So maybe I will focus on, Gregory, on the Lord's Supper, when Jesus talked about when they had the meal of the Passover meal. But this Passover meal, Gregory, when Jesus celebrated with his disciples, it wasn't about the Passover that the Jews are celebrating when they have been liberated from Egypt, thousands of years back. He was talking about his body, Jesus's body, the bread representing his body, and the wine representing his blood, which is shed. So was it, Gregory, just Jesus talking about his forthcoming crucifixion there, or was there something more in this symbolism there in the Last Supper when Jesus celebrated with his disciples?
First, before one goes into that, there was the mention you made of Passover, of Ramadan, of Easter, of spring.
Yes.
With spring, everything must become new. So that which is intuitively the representation of these, which has always been before Passover came in, before Ramadan came in, before Easter came in, as we now in quotes celebrate, for the processes in nature, these processes which brought the earth into existence and prepared it to be able to receive of the radiations that keep it in motion and movement. There is always a beginning. That beginning is new. That beginning is celebrated by those who, first in their intuitions, strive to become new in spirit in all their activities. That is the key. What is then represented in the so-called Passover or in the so-called Ramadan is an attempt to bring the new into their being, to bring the new by abstaining away from that which is mundane. But very sadly, many of these religions still hold on and interpret the mundaneness of their activities as worship. That which is of worship must be homogeneous with that which is spiritual. Therefore, when many try to interpret this and tie it to earthly things, they already are mistaken. Now, it must also be recognized that Christ himself, being the love of the Almighty, was prepared to make the sacrifice of that journey in living that from divinity or divinity unsubstantiate across the primordial spiritual, across the animistic species, and came to the world of matter, and then finally here on earth, which is of matter. That he himself, being the love self, is more of that which is essential. That which is the essence is substantiality. One may refer to him as the embodiment of substantiality, which embodiment embodies love. It is through him, it is through his being that forms, that substantiate or substantiality came into existence. And that which he was referring to is or requires the highest of knowledge, of which one must kindly nudge many to examine the work in the light of truth. Christ himself is light, the embodiment of light, of the truth. When the human personality in humility examines intuitively this work, he or she will come to a recognition. The joy which we hold, or the joy which we accrue, will leave the human personality in perpetual happiness.
Thank you for that, Gregory. There's something I would like to read from the Grail Message, which is very, how can I say, applicable or appropriate for our topic tonight, and it's a lecture from the Grail Message, and it's titled "The Crucifixion of the Son of God and the Lord's Supper." And I'm not going to read the whole lecture, just a section of the beginning, and I think it will help, well, let's say, well, it will certainly show the events of Easter at the time of Christ, you know, the death of crucifixion of Christ, as it said, the lecture title says it all, actually. But I'm not going to read the whole thing. So here, listeners, this is from the Grail Message in the Light of Truth by Abdurrasheen, and it's a lecture is titled "The Crucifixion of the Son of God and the Lord's Supper." At the death of Christ, the veil which shut out the Holy of Holies from mankind was rent in twain. This happening is taken as a symbol that a separation between divinity and mankind ceased at the moment of the Saviour's sacrifice on the cross, and that direct communication was established in its stead. However, this interpretation is wrong. Through his crucifixion, men rejected the Son of God as their expected Messiah, and this made the separation all the greater. The veil was rent because henceforth the Holy of Holies was no longer necessary. It was exposed to all eyes as well as to impure currents, because symbolically speaking, after this deed, divinity would no longer set foot on this earth, thus rendering the Holy of Holies superfluous. This is the exact contrary of the existing interpretations, which express nothing but a great presumption on the part of the human spirit. Neither was the death on the cross a necessary sacrifice, but a murder, a dastardly crime. Every other explanation is a misinterpretation which either has its origin in ignorance or is meant as an excuse. Christ certainly did not come to this earth with the intention of letting himself be crucified. Neither does redemption lie in the crucifixion. Christ was crucified because of his teaching as a troublesome bringer of truth. It was not his death on the cross that could or should bring redemption, but the truth he gave to mankind in his word. The truth, however, was irksome to the religious leaders and the heads of the temples of that time. It was an annoyance because it severely undermined their influence. It would be exactly the same today in many places. Mankind has not changed in this respect. The teachers of that time took their standing, it is true, on the good old traditions as those of today. But through those who practiced and interpreted them, these traditions had become nothing but rigid and empty forms, wholly wanting in life, the same as may be often observed today. But he who wanted to bring the necessary life into the existing word naturally also upset their practices and explanations. But he did not upset the word itself. He liberated and redeemed the people from the debasing rigidity and emptiness. And this was naturally a great vexation to those who soon recognized how effectively this would interfere with their false leadership. For this reason, the bringer of truth, the liberator from the burden of erroneous interpretations, had to be rendered suspect and persecuted, as in spite of all their efforts, they did not succeed in ridiculing him. They sought to discredit him. His earthly upbringing as the son of a carpenter served to brand him as unlearned and therefore incompetent to give explanations as a layman, just as it is today with everyone who exposes the rigid dogma that chokes every free and vital aspiration from the very start. His opponents carefully avoided going into his explanations as such because they quite rightly felt that they would lose in a purely objective discussion. They contented themselves with slandering him maliciously through their bribed agents, and finally did not shrink from availing themselves of an opportune moment to accuse him publicly and falsely and bring him to the cross, in order to remove the danger he represented to their authority and power. His violent death, in the form at the time used by the Romans to execute people, was not in itself the redemption, nor did it bring redemption. It atoned for none of man's guilt, liberated them from nothing, but burdened them still more with a dastardly murder. If still here and there a cult has arisen which sees in this murder a necessary and principal part of the Son of God's work of redemption, this only distracts man's attention from the greater value which alone could bring this redemption. It diverts him from the true mission of the Saviour, from that which necessitated his coming from the divine sphere to the earth. The purpose of his mission, however, was not to suffer death on the cross, but to bring the truth into the maze of dogmatic rigidity and emptiness which debase the human spirit, and to explain the relations between God, the creation, and mankind as they actually are. Through this knowledge, the illusions which the constricted spirit of man added, and which covered up the reality, had feebly to fall away of their own accord. Not till then could man see clearly before him the way leading upwards. Redemption lies solely in bringing of this truth and the consequent liberation from errors. It is redemption from obscured vision, from blind faith. The word blind most suitably depicts this false state. I'm going to end there, listeners. This was a reading from the lecture in the Grail Message called The Crucifixion of the Son of God and the Lord's Supper. And I hope, listeners, you found that, you could say, explanation, clearing, the picture, well, clarifying and correcting, you could say, how many of us have, thought what the meaning of Jesus' death on the cross was meant to be. So hopefully that's helped you there. And I just advise you, or I should say, I invite you all to investigate the Grail Message in the Light of Truth by Abdushin for yourself. And hopefully you'll receive answers to many questions of life. Gregory, we've come to the end of our show tonight. Is there anything you'd like to say to the listeners to say goodbye?
Wishing them a beautiful Easter season.
Thank you. And dear listeners, same wishes for you, from me. Happy Easter to you. And just to remind you, if you are interested in knowing or finding out about the Grail Message or getting a copy of the Grail Message for yourself, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. Thank you for listening to us, and we'll be back as usual next Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. UK time, with another topic. I wish you again a blessed week. Good night.